Hi, and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Nick. And today we're exploring something that sounds quite poetic, but it's also very real, the idea of rewriting your life story in English.
Not just improving your grammar or your fluency, but actually reshaping the way you talk about yourself, how you understand your past, and maybe even how you imagine your future, all through this new language.
Because here's the thing, language shapes the way we think. And when you start expressing your personal story in English, something begins to shift. You choose different words. You focus on different parts. You begin to frame yourself differently.
And that's incredibly powerful. It's not just translation, it's transformation. You're not copying your old story into a new language. You're recreating it. With a new rhythm, a new voice, maybe even a new level of self-understanding.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about what it really means to rewrite your story, why it can be healing, freeing, and honestly, one of the most meaningful parts of learning English.
Because when you sit down and try to write, or speak, about your life in English, you're not just practicing vocabulary. You're making choices. Which details to include, which words to use, how to describe things you've maybe never said out loud before.
Yeah, and those choices matter. They say a lot about how you see yourself now, and how you want to be seen. It's like putting a mirror up to your identity, but in a slightly different light.
Some people find that when they talk about difficult moments from their past in English, it feels softer somehow. A bit more distant. Like the emotional weight is reduced just enough to talk about it more freely.
And others say the opposite, that English helps them say things they never had the words for in their native language. That somehow, this new voice gave them permission to express feelings they used to hide.
And that's something we don't talk about enough in language learning. We always focus on grammar, fluency, pronunciation, but we forget that language is also a tool for processing our lives. For making sense of who we are.
So when you rewrite your story in English, it's not just for your language skills. It's for you. It's a chance to explore who you've been, who you're becoming, and how you want to show up in the world, not just as a learner, but as a person.
And I think that's why it feels different. Because English isn't your first language. It brings a bit of distance, but also possibility. You're not stuck with the same old labels, or the same old narratives. You can say it differently.
You might notice you leave out certain parts. Or you focus more on something you never highlighted before. Maybe you describe yourself in a more compassionate way. That's not just language learning, that's self-growth.
And even the way you talk about time can shift. Maybe in your first language, things feel heavier, like I failed this exam, or I used to be bad at school. But in English, you might say, I struggled a bit, but I'm learning. It's the same story, but told with more kindness.
I've heard learners say that writing their stories in English felt like letting go of old shame. Like they could look at their past from a new angle. Less judgment, more curiosity.
Yeah. And that space between languages, it gives you room to breathe. To reflect. To ask, do I still believe this part of my story? Or can I rewrite this moment, not to lie about it, but to understand it better?
And that's what's so fascinating. You're not just translating words, you're reshaping meaning. You're deciding what kind of narrator you want to be for your own life.
And even if you're not a writer, even if you're just saying it out loud to yourself, that act of telling your story in English, it's brave. And it's powerful.
You could start with something really simple. One paragraph. One scene from your life. Describe your childhood bedroom. Talk about your first day at school. Share a memory that makes you smile.
Or rewrite a moment that used to feel embarrassing. Say it in English, gently. See if it feels different. Sometimes, the emotional tone changes when we change the language, and that can be really healing.
Because the more you practice doing this, the more your English becomes a space where your story can live. Not just textbook sentences, but your life, told in your own words, with honesty, with care.
And that builds a deeper connection with the language. You're not just learning English to pass a test or get a job. You're using it to make meaning. To remember. To heal. To imagine something new.
And I think that's where real fluency starts, not just when you can talk about the weather or give directions, but when you can tell someone, this is who I am. This is where I've been.
And even if your grammar isn't perfect, even if you pause or hesitate, the message still lands. People listen. Because when something is true, it doesn't need to be flawless to be understood.
Exactly. And the more you tell your story, to yourself, to friends, to the page, the more confident you become in your voice. Not just your English voice, but your whole voice.
And I think there's something quite beautiful about that. That the very act of learning a second language can lead you closer to your own identity. Not away from it, towards it.
So maybe English isn't just a skill to master. Maybe it's a mirror. A tool. A companion. A way to look back with softness and forward with courage.
And maybe, as you tell your story in this new voice, you begin to realize, it's not just about who you were, it's about who you're becoming, and how you choose to name that journey now.
And the process of naming things, even painful things, in a new language can sometimes help you see them differently. Not to forget them, but to hold them with a bit more space, a bit more clarity.
Yeah. Like when you say, I felt stuck, instead of, I was a failure. Or, I was scared, instead of, I was weak. English gives you access to new ways of understanding your own emotions.
And when you start doing that regularly, you're not just learning how to use English, you're learning how to be gentler with yourself. You're learning to reflect without harshness. To remember without shame.
I think that's what makes this practice so special. You're writing, or speaking, or even just thinking, but something else is happening too. You're growing into your own story, and giving it a new voice.
And the beautiful thing is, no one else needs to understand it perfectly. It doesn't have to sound polished or professional. What matters is that it feels true, even in its simplest form.
Even something like, I came here alone. I was nervous. I wanted to try. That's a powerful sentence. Honest, clear, human. And that's what English can be, a place for your humanity.
So if you've never tried it before, maybe now is the time. Start small. A sentence, a journal entry, a quiet conversation with yourself. Just begin to tell your story, not as you used to tell it, but as you want to tell it now.
And don't worry about whether it sounds clever or impressive. That's not the point. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. And sometimes, your most simple sentences will carry the most truth.
You might write, I moved to a new place, and I felt alone. That's already powerful. Or, I'm learning to speak, even when I'm afraid. These are the kinds of lines that shape your voice, not just as a language learner, but as a person.
And the more you allow yourself to tell those truths in English, the more comfortable you become inside the language. It starts to feel like a second home, not just something borrowed, but something belonging.
You may even notice that English gives you words you didn't realize you needed. A way to describe a feeling, or frame a memory, or plan something ahead. It doesn't replace your native language, it adds to it.
Exactly. You're not losing anything, you're layering meaning. Giving yourself more tools to understand your own experience. And that's what storytelling really is, making sense of who we are, one sentence at a time.
So if you've ever felt disconnected from your English, try writing from your life. Not about textbooks or language goals, just your memories, your emotions, your hopes. In your words. At your pace.
So if English has felt like a set of rules, or a mountain to climb, maybe this is your reminder. It can also be a place to rest, to reflect, and to write your life with a little more softness.
Not to impress anyone. Not to be perfect. But simply to honor your journey, in your voice, in your way, and in your words.
Thanks for being with us today. We hope this episode gave you something gentle to think about, and maybe even something brave to write.
We'll be back soon with more, right here on the British Accent Podcast. Until then, take care, and speak like the story matters.
Because it does.